All right, so good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's public meeting regarding the application to amend the City of Ottawa's zoning bylaw at 910 Mark Road. This meeting is being hosted by the Councillor's Office. Before we begin, a land acknowledgement. Ottawa is built on the unceded Anishinaabe Algonquin territory. The peoples of the Anishinaabe Algonquin territory have lived on this territory for millennia. Their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. La ville d'Ottawa rend hommage au peuple et au territoire de la nation Anishinaabe Algonquin. La ville d'Ottawa rend hommage à toutes les Premières Nations, à tous les Inuits, à tous les Métis, de même qu'aux précieuses contributions passées et présentes à cette terre. Tonight's meeting will proceed as follows. We'll begin with a few opening remarks from your ward councillor, Councillor Curry. Then we will turn to a presentation from the applicant led by Kayla Blakely from Novatech. She's joined by her colleagues, Greg Winters and Miranda Virginillo from Novatech, and by Kim Pham and Zahia Sayah from Neuf Architects. The applicant is Lapine Corporation, represented here by Pascal Lapine. We'll then turn to the city planner charged with overseeing the file, Alex Gaetian. He's joined by Lisa Stern as well. Following this, the floor will open to questions from the public. Individuals wishing to ask a question can do so by using the raise hand function or by submitting questions in the chat. Those raising their hands will be queued, prompted to unmute themselves, and given 3 minutes to formulate and ask a question. It won't be a back and forth ask a question. It'll just be a period for you to ask a question. I'll raise my hand at 1 minute and verbally notify you at 30 seconds. And I will be monitoring the chat for questions and asking them intermittently. The meeting is scheduled to end at 8:30. Any outstanding questions can be directed to the Councillor's Office, who will help facilitate an answer. Yes, so I'll pass it to Councillor Curry.
Thanks, Andrew, for all that. That's a lot of information. Thanks, everybody, for being here. These community consultations are very important, and they always have been, but I think maybe even more so now because of the sort of changing climate and many bills that the province has put forward regarding planning and housing. So very important to get all of your comments and thoughts and ideas out here right now. That's my view. I really want to hear what your thoughts are, and so do the planners, and so does the builder and all those representing the builder. I will say to you that, you know, we have a number of files coming up and a number of these consultations coming up. So if you've only been here for the first time to this one, I hope you enjoy it and appreciate that it is an important meeting to be held in your community and participate in more. But thank you thank you all for coming tonight. I really appreciate this. I'll be here to listen.
Great. So Kayla, you're more than welcome to commence your presentation.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. Bring up our slides. Okay. I would just start off to thank Councillor Curry and Andrew and team for organizing this meeting this evening, and echo Councillor Curry's thanks to all of you as well for joining. To introduce myself, my name is Kayla Blakely. I'm a project planner with Novatech. I'm joined, as Andrew mentioned, by a few of my colleagues and counterparts at Neuf, who's the project architect, as well as CGH, who is the transportation engineer consultants. So perhaps to keep it brief, I would just ask once we get into question period, if my colleagues and counterparts can just introduce themselves as they need. We're also joined by Lapine, who's the owner and builder of this project. Lapine, they specialize in building quality apartment communities. They target more long-term rental suites. You might be familiar with some of their other developments in the Kanata Town Center. They're well known for their design excellence in terms of their units and their amenities and their grounds for residents to create this enjoyable, livable community. They're also a Kanata-based firm, and so quite active in the community. And yes, we're excited to be involved in this project. As a bit of background, some of you may recall the site being subject to a previous development proposal. At the time, it was intended for commercial development with a mix of restaurant, gas bar, large and small format retail. Essentially, following that proposal, Lepine has acquired this property from the former owner and is proceeding with a new proposal for a mixed-use mid-rise building. And that's kind of totally reworking the old concept and aligning it with more the policy direction that's the vision for March Road. So that's a bit of the background as to where we are today. So we're here looking for feedback on the proposal as we're working through the zoning amendment applications, as well as site plan control applications that have been filed with the city. I will start with just brief context. So highlighted in red is the subject site. It's a former rural residential property. It now sits vacant on the east side of March Road, just north of Maxwell Bridge. For orientation, it's immediately north of the McDonald's site on March Road. Shown on this aerial are also the tributaries of Shirley's Brook. So as you can see, the site is bound on 3 of its sides by these tributaries. That to the north and the east, they feature vegetated corridors with water courses, whereas that to the south functions more as a stormwater drainage channel, all eventually connecting together. We had included a few street view photos just to kind of demonstrate the area in terms of existing conditions of the subject site, which again is just kind of vacant, cleared area for the most part, as well as vegetated corridors along those tributaries that I mentioned. And some of the surrounding uses very much reflect the, I guess, former, more rural character of the area. And then this is just looking north at the Maxwell and March Road intersection. So that being said, in terms of the permitted or the existing uses, this area is undergoing transition. There's extensive planning framework that's excuse me, been completed for the Kanata North urban expansion area. So this is intended to kind of piece together some of the future development that's to surround the subject site. So this is envisioned to include a number of mixed-use neighborhoods that will provide a variety of housing, commercial blocks, parks, schools, pedestrian connections, and form complete communities once built out. Just briefly on the policy context that's informed this proposal. Speaking to the City of Ottawa new official plan, the official plan designates March Road as a Main Street corridor. So those areas are generally to include a mix of residential uses as well as non-residential uses that are more conducive to a denser, more urban environment. So overall, the aim is to eventually achieve a greater mix of uses and densities along these corridors, and that will provide more range of housing than you might see within the adjacent neighborhoods. I would add, actually, before I go on, I would add in terms of a built form, development along March Road, actually the entirety of March Road up to the urban boundary, is intended for up to mid-rise building height. So generally under the city's policy, that's up to 9 stories. So that's informed this new proposal, which is to be a new mixed-use development with a terraced height profile. So 9 stories proposed along March Road, which will step down to 7 stories and then to 3 stories towards the rear, which I'll explain in a bit more detail in the coming slides. And this was just intended to show the subject site as it lies just outside of the Kanata North Community Design Plan. Some of you might be familiar with it, the kind of extensive planning work that's gone into that. The subject site is outside of that area, but the intent was to very much tie into the adjacent uses. So based on this plan, March Road, either side adjacent to the site, is expected for mixed use development. So that was in keeping with the approach for this proposal. One can also see in light blue the creek corridors that have been identified throughout Kanata North community. So similarly, the intent would be to basically extend and apply the same corridor protection to the subject site. So I can briefly provide an overview of the proposal. I'll speak to certain details and then I'll actually pass it to my counterpart at NUF, who will give you more explanation as to the design intent. The up on screen is the current detailed site plan. So it's a very unique site in that its setting very much benefits from the adjacent natural features of the tributaries on all sides. So the primary design approach was to ensure setbacks are provided for each of those 3 tributaries such that they can be protected, as well as provide enjoyment for residents and the neighbors. So this does provide, as you can see, for quite substantial setbacks from lot lines and therefore from neighboring uses. In terms of the site access is proposed from March Road. At this time, it's intended as a full movement access, just a stop control. Vehicles, it will become more clear as we flip into certain slides, but access will lead to underground parking. There's 3 levels of parking below grade to provide plenty and actually a surplus to what's required in terms of city parking requirements. There's also additional at-grade parking for visitors, for commercial tenants, as well as a circular driveway for kind of drop-off, pickup. And that will integrate with a large landscaped courtyard that's within the buildings. Perhaps this will show it more nicely, so that the intent is to create a kind of garden landscape within the courtyard for amenity and enjoyment by residents. In terms of the massing, so as briefly mentioned, the intent is to have a terraced height to provide transition in all directions. So the massing will comprise a 9-story block towards March Road, which will step down to a 3-story podium that connects the 2 blocks. The strategy was to orient that towards the rear, kind of facing the existing residential to the rear. And then the second block to the rear will step up to 7 stories. This is just a perspective view of explaining basically illustrating the massing approach for the site. And we've included a few of the cross sections just to illustrate, given that the site abuts the residential to the rear, both existing and planned, there was consideration for sensitive design to those adjacent uses, knowing March Road will largely be similar scale and format development in the future. So these are intended to show the distance from that residential to the rear. And so it illustrates the approach to provide large protected corridors along the tributaries. This is in addition to, there is a public, like an open space block with a pathway to the rear of the site. So the tributary corridors together with the open space do provide for nearly 80-meter separation between the site and the closest abutting residential uses. And this study kind of showed the intent for a typical angular plane, 45 degrees. So just illustrating views from those existing dwellings will be protected. And similarly, this is the same view, slightly more to the north, where it's looking onto the 7-story block. Again, a large distance between the uses. Briefly to comment on the landscape approach, there will be emphasis on planting beds, tree plantings, creating gardens, and very much enjoyable spaces for residents. The attached illustrates conceptual landscaping. Of note here is the approach for the corridors that surround the site. There's upwards of 100 existing trees within those corridors, and virtually all of them will be retained as part of the proposed development. And that's given that the development is focused outside of those vegetated corridors. And of course, there'll be supplemental plantings along the streetscape and within the courtyard and adjacent drive aisles. And finally, this is just to include for illustrative purposes. I've mentioned on a few occasions the approach for maintaining those corridors. So this has been seen throughout the Kanata North area. So a similar approach is applied to the subject site. So that will see a 20-meter setback from the tributary such that an overall 40 meters is protected. And I believe with that, I will turn it over to Kim Pham, who's the project architect, to give a bit more detail as to the design.
Thank you, Kyla. Good evening, everybody. Kim Atnaf, architect, collaborating from several years now with Lepin family. So I'm very happy to present this project for you. So as you can see here, it's a colored plan showing the massing on the ground floor. You can see clearly that March Road at the bottom of the page. You entering to the courtyard through an access where the garage access is very recessed from the street. Along March Road, you can see 3 commercial spaces and amenity spaces in orange. In terms of architecture, the primary facade on March Road features large windows on the ground floor overlooking the commercial establishment, amenity spaces, and the lobby, which leads to the landscape courtyard, as you can see on the plan. If Kyla, you may pass to another page, please. Here you can see at the front the commercial spaces. A pergola adorns the second floor unit terraces, forming a covered gallery along the commercial spaces and elegantly integrating signage support into the overall architecture of the project. Then on the other page, on the elevation, you will see the marquee at the main entrance of the lobby space that signal the entrance over here. All of the project facade are articulated by volumes on different planes, each highlighted by varied textures. As the project is surrounded by a green belt, as Kyla explained, texture expressing the grain of wooden shingles and stone in precast concrete panels with natural tones was chosen for that project. On each side of the main building, you can see step terrace and on the roof on each side, providing beautiful outdoor spaces for the residential units, which with expansive views to the surroundings. There's the same treatment to the building on the north side, that is 7th floor height. The two buildings are connected by a lower volume, as you can see here on the facade at the right, which relates to the existing houses located more than 250 feet from the building. To respect the existing topography and avoid any blind walls at the project perimeter, units at the first basement level directly open to the outside. These private terraces includes planting. So you can see here in the section, I don't know if that's you can see clearly because it's a bit small, but P1 level, you have some units that looks directly on the ground. So all those private terraces includes planting that are managed by the landscape architect very nicely. Then on the other page, the indoor pool that you can see the volume at the right of this elevation provides a shared terrace to the gym that is on the ground floor, overlooking the large natural space surrounding the project. So as mentioned earlier, this elevation and perspective show the step terraces, the volume distinguished by different textures and colors, echoing to the surrounding nature and expressing contemporary, but also warm and inviting architecture. Then if we move to the other page, and we can look at each plan if ever you want some explanation, but as mentioned by Kyla, we have a partial P3 and two entire parking floor. Here you can see the P1 level with all units at the back. Then the ground floor. So you can see that there's a secondary lobby entrance entering from the courtyard to the 7th floor building. And then you can see every plan going up. Each time you can see the stepped terrace. There are generous private terraces when you go up to the last floors. So this is a 380 units building, 3 commercial spaces on the ground floor. We have more parking spots than required. So more than 560 parking, which 12 by free parking. And 27 parking are outside on ground. 195 bicycle parking spaces in the parking. So sorry, I don't have a very good English, but I hope you understood. And of course, you can ask any question you want. Thank you for listening.
Great. Kayla, is that the end of your part of the presentation?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that wraps up our presentation. So yeah, happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, so first, I'll go to Alex. So if you want to unshare your screen, I'll turn to Alex, I guess, just for his remarks, and then maybe to share his contact information, and then we'll turn it open to questions.
Sure, yeah, so I will not take very long. Just want to let people know where we're at in the process. So it's a bit of an odd application because it is a different application or a different proposal under the same application as the previous commercial development. And right now we've received one submission of the zoning bylaw amendment, and we are in the process of preparing comments for that. So that's a good time to provide comments. And at the moment, staff do not have a position, and we will, with time, come to one. And so through the zoning bylaw amendment, that will set out things like the proposed use as well as setbacks. In this case, there are a number of setbacks to water courses, which are often not present on sites. And then it will go to planning and housing committee to be voted on. And after that is approved by council. So we're still somewhat early in the process. And I guess I've been in contact with some people, but maybe we can, well, my contact info is on DevApps for the project is probably the easiest way rather than just saying it. So I think we can probably open things up to questions generally.
Yeah, okay. That sounds good. So I'll just put your contact information in the chat. Yeah, so you can raise your hand to be queued, or you can send me a message in the chat. I do have a message in the chat or question in the chat to begin. And I think this would be directed actually to Alex. Where, meaning what website, can we obtain additional information on building progress and any changes to the plan during the construction? By which I think they mean changes to the proposed plan now to when they begin construction. Is there somewhere where one can gather information on this?
Yes, beyond DevApps. Maybe I'll just share that so Andrew can share it.
Yeah.
So that will have any updated application materials for the zoning bylaw amendment, as well as probably fairly soon site plan control. And so zoning is kind of like the broader use is permitted, and site plan control takes care of the kind of grittier aspects. So things like site servicing, access and things like that. And then after those are both approved, then a building permit can be issued. It can be applied for prior to that. However, building permit drawings, unless the applicant shares them, are not public. However, site plan control will provide you with a very good understanding of what is proposed, but it might not have all the interior details that would be covered by a building permit.
Okay, perfect. I will go to Peter, who I know has a question. If anybody's having difficulty raising their hand, it's under reactions, finding the raise hand function. It's under reactions. So Peter, you can go ahead.
Hello, you can hear me? Yeah, okay. So I had sent a number of questions to Alex regarding the traffic situation, which is one of the elephants in the room. And I'd noted that the traffic study was conducted in March of 2020 during COVID restrictions, and a 0.5% growth rate had been used. So, you know, the baseline seems a little skewed if you're doing it during COVID lockdown. And so I don't think the 0.5% growth rate is probably the right number to be using. Can the traffic specialists comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll go to Chris Gordon, I guess this would be, but just so it's clear, you can ask all your questions now, and then we'll take note of them, and then everybody will respond because we don't want to limit the back and forth. So if you have any other questions, you can get them out now, and then we'll go to all the respondents.
Okay, there were a few other questions then. There's no solid plan for the March Road widening. So there's mention of some interim scenario based on 4 lanes and consideration of the future. I think it's called the BRT. And so is the plan to guarantee that the positioning of curbs and medians will be consistent with the BRT vision? Be another question. Also within that same transportation impact assessment, there's a comment about an unexplained reduction of the right of way. That's currently 3.5 meters have mysteriously disappeared. It was originally 48 and now it's 44.5. There seems to be a lack of explanation of what's gone on there. And again, I want to be sure that the plans account for any future widening of March Road and the BRT plans. Again, on the traffic situation, there's a serviceability report. Sorry, did you want me to pause?
No, I was saying 1 minute.
1 minute, okay. There's, I think somebody mentioned that we're going to start off by just having a stop sign at this intersection. Is that right? And then there's talk about the applicant must be aware that although the BRT on March Road is not listed on the affordable network of the TMP, whatever that is, a full movement access to the site will not be supported. As such, this signalized intersection is considered throwaway. So it sounds like if the stop sign doesn't work because of traffic flow, there'll be a traffic light, and then that is not compatible with BRT. And so whatever considered a throwaway means would happen. So that seems to be a big disconnect there in terms of the fine details. So those are the main ones, but I think Alex has others that were in my original email to him that need to be answered too.
Great. So I think I'll turn to the transportation engineer, Chris Gordon, for the first few questions. So the traffic one, the TIA study, the reduction, and then the comment on the affordable network, and then the March Road widening and the BRT. I might turn to Alex for that. Yeah, okay.
And Andrew, if you don't mind unmuting Robin Marinak, who's with me at CGH, she can, oh no, that's all good. She can take a crack at the first part, and then I'll help out with the second and third, I think.
Great. Thanks, Chris, and thanks, Peter, for your questions. So as Chris said, I can definitely answer the first set of questions that you posed. So I am, as with Chris, part of CGH Transportation, and we've been working on the traffic and transportation elements to support this development. So with respect to your questions about the TIA being completed in March of 2020, that is a very good point. The counts that were taken were actually taken prior to the restrictions that were implemented. They were counted on, let me just bring that up for a second, March 4th. So they made it in just in time prior to those restrictions. So actually, given how quickly those restrictions came into place and how unexpectedly those happened, those March 4th counts are considered valid, and those are things that have been accepted by city staff, and that was a methodology that was reviewed by city staff. With respect to the 0.5% growth rate, given those counts were considered to be accurate of standard traffic in the area and at those intersections, the 0.5% growth rate was accepted as well. And that actually comes from some of the other traffic studies that have been done for the area with, and more, I guess more specifically to the area just north of this study called the Kanata North Community Design Plan. And that's where that 0.5% growth rate comes from. And that as well was also accepted and approved by city staff.
Thanks, Robin, and I'll take the baton from there. And to build on what Robin was saying, no question that we get where you're coming from. March Road is a busy place. There's a lot of development that is scheduled to occur there, and between Novatech and ourselves, I think we worked on many of the call it the suburban developments on both sides, flanking both sides of March Road. So as we've worked through those studies over the last couple of years, we do get a sense of what that background growth is going to be. And then the way that it's been presented in the study, as Robin mentioned, is we've taken a look at all of that and then layered on what this site is going to do. So the future volumes, we do have some actually tons of empirical data that we use to then try to do our best to predict that. But really what it comes down to is that, good and bad, good that the city has worked at looking at the future ultimate network for March Road. We know that in the fullness of time, we're going to have rapid transit running along this corridor, and we are needing to look to gear our developments to be synergistic with that facility. So the EA, as it was completed, definitely established the property lines that were going to be required for the full cross section. So when it comes to 910 March Road, absolutely the location of the property line and what is then considered to have the rest of the development, it considers that spatial need for March Road. So we've gone from today to the distant future and the ultimate network. So I think we're protected there. But where I think you're getting, and this is something that is a topic that we're working on, I think very important to the discussion, is that we need to understand how do we get from day one to ultimate. So interestingly, as of day one, March is currently in its current state, and a stop control, full movement access will work. Depending on the timing, if this development is up and running in a couple of years, it may be 5 to 10 years as the Minto or Kavanaugh or whatever other residential developments occur in the area. So monitoring will be a really important piece to this, which between Novatech and ourselves will be doing, but the city will also be doing. And then we need to think that in the ultimate network, where there was a full BRT movement, full BRT system, yes, there was not within that EA, there was no contemplation for a traffic signal being located in this spot. That choice, I think, it was one that was without understanding potentially what 910 March Road could be. So I think there could be the opportunity to revisit that in the future and see if the full movement access will be required. But I think a lot of that will have to do with the monitoring. So the interim step, and then I'll get to the next question. The interim step then becomes the concept where March Road is widened to accommodate the traffic demands, but without having the full BRT being implemented at that stage. So I think the construction of March Road is actually going to happen in several stages. The first will just be to a 4-lane roadway, but then ultimately with the BRT running down the middle. So during the interim stage, I think that there is the opportunity to put in a full movement signalized intersection, and we'll work towards figuring out how that can best be accommodated and ultimately paid for. So those are details to come, but that's really what our plan is at this point. Sorry for the ramble, but I hope that that got us to the answers.
Great. And yeah, Alex, regarding the March Road widening and the curbs and medium development along with the BRT.
Yeah, so the answer, I guess, is it might not accommodate all the curbs and medians because they wouldn't be built yet, but it would accommodate the necessary width. So through the site plan control process, the city can require the conveyance of land if, say, a road widening is identified on the official plan. Sometimes it's also for site triangles. So the exact right of way in this location will be determined at the time of site plan control, and it will either be 44.5 or 48 meters. And so that, so that will be determined. And then in terms of timing, I think it is likely that you'll see 4 lanes and probably then eventually the BRT. I think at this point it will be past 2031 and may also be constructed in phases. So from south to north. So that's all we really know for now.
Okay, I saw Greg had wanted to add it. And then what does the fact that it's not on the affordable network signify? Does that just mean there's no funding committed to it?
Yeah, it would mean that it is not currently funded, but it is identified as a project. So
Come on. Okay, sorry, Greg.
Yeah, so I'm a director and a planning consultant with Novatech, and I'm working with Kayla on this project just to clarify some of the comments that my colleagues have made about the right-of-way protections and the BRT and the timing for the construction of March Road. So just on the right-of-way itself, the actual protected limit for the right-of-way for March Road was established when we did the community design plan for March Road that was approved in 2016. It went through an environmental assessment process and an official plan amendment. And at that time, the 44.5 meters was protected in the official plan, and that's been carried over into the new official plan. So if you look at table 1 in the volume 1 of the new official plan that was approved in November 24th of last year, you'll see that it's 44.5 meters. And so as Alex had indicated, through a site plan application under the Planning Act, the municipality can require that the developer provide their portion of that future road widening at the time of the registration of this plan of the site plan. And so that measurement's taken from the center line of the road. And so the PIN would be responsible providing 1/2 of that road allowance up to that full 44. So 22.25 meters on one side of the road over. So that's where that 3 meters comes from on that site plan. And our site plan entirely corresponds to that. All the future works for March Road and everything will be constructed within that 44 meters. And that's been identified, as I said, through that environmental assessment where we had developed a cross-section in concert with city staff on what that right-of-way would look like. And that was where we had the interim measures of the 4 lanes of traffic plus cycle tracks and stuff for the future community. And then ultimately, as Chris had indicated, there would be an eventual widening of the road with BRT down the middle and accommodation for that with extra turn movements and everything else to come along. Now that will be done in phases. Now we talk about the terminology affordable and not affordable. So the Transportation Master Plan, we could all use these acronyms, the TMP or the Transportation Master Plan was approved in 2013. And at that time, March Road was just below the threshold of considered as a viable project in that 2013 master plan. So we're hoping the city is undertaking a current update to the Transportation Master Plan, which should be approved in late 2024, or maybe early 2025 at this point in time. And we're hoping that what will happen is city staff will identify as March Road will still be a #1 project on that list. And when it rises to council for approval, is that it'll be listed as a project that's not only viable, has affordable, and will be built in time for that interim measure. The BRT, that's going to require probably other levels of funding from other levels of government to do something like that. So that might be a longer term project that will happen in the future. But hopefully, again, the TMP, this new TMP coming out, will provide some guidance on when we can expect that to happen. So hopefully that answers a few of the questions.
Great. So I'll go to Marcel. You can get back online if you have any outstanding questions as well. So Marcel.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo some of the comments that were made about I think it is a significant issue. Certainly when we had the discussions about the Kanata expansion lands way back when, the city looked at traffic And traffic was a concern back then. Since then, after the approval of the Kanata North expansion lands, so many more housing developments have been approved since then. So many more are being tabled for more consideration. Tall, 30-story, 20-story, 18-story apartment buildings are looked at for the focus closer to the high-tech area. That's a lot of traffic for March Road. You're now talking about BRT. BRT is way, way, way down the road. There's no funding for that whatsoever. The cost that was anticipated at one point in time now has probably skyrocketed, that it would be impossible to do it without future funding. So I think we're looking at a situation where we could be putting ourselves that we're landlocked and we can't get out because the traffic from March Road is getting so bad. When you add all these additional residential units, it's only going to get worse. The left-hand turn, Lapine Apartments, love them. They're beautiful, great. The target audience, I'm probably part of that target audience. Never in a million years would I consider renting in that particular location. The thought of turning left onto March Road, which you're going to be doing 99% of the time with a stop sign, forget it. It's not going to happen. It's not safe. So 99% of the time, most of the residents are going to be turning right and trying to find a safe place to do a U-turn to get back into the direction they want to go. So just so you know, I wouldn't move there, and I would think a lot of other individuals in my situation would take that under consideration as well. Okay? Traffic light is definitely what's going to be needed. For the previously, when we were looking at the commercial development, I thought there was some discussions about a traffic light could not go there because of the location of the other traffic lights. And I don't know if there's a situation you can't have too many too close. But once that BRT, if it ever does go in and there's no light, like I just don't understand why anybody would want to live there. So the traffic issue is one thing. Another question I have is, I do live on Windance, so full disclosure there.
30 seconds.
Okay, so maybe I'll leave it there and I'll raise my hand again and have another chance later on.
If it's just short, you can finish it up now.
No, it's not.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
I can certainly speak more to the issue of traffic and access in the short term. And so one of the processes that the city has us do is roadway modification approval. And no question that part of what we'll be doing and looking at as part of the site plan will be exactly that. So to what Peter was talking about within property lines and understanding the full EA, trying to take a look at what the interim solution might be, and then making sure that any works that are going to be done as part of an intersection improvement can be done. The Marcel, as you mentioned, there is something about traffic signals with respect to proximity. Ideally, signals are located between 200 and 250 meters. And I actually come from the traffic signal background. So in fact, the city does work very hard and is very good at actually working on the flow of traffic. I know it's kind of like transit, we can all make fun of it, but the reality is that without the efforts that they do, it could be a lot worse. So the location that we've chosen, which is kind of to the north side of the site, is actually a fairly ideal location for a traffic signal with respect to the flow of where this signal will be, the next signal to the north heading into the Brazil and Minto, and then the next section further to the north. So the spacing of the signals is really not bad. So no question that as we get through zoning, and I hear your point, Marcel, and what Peter was mentioning before, that it's a congested and a busy place now. The operating speeds tend to be higher because it's a bit of a rural section. So as part of our work, we do need to take a look at the access here, and also considering the different developments happening further to the north, and trying to establish what the ideal interim solution can be. And a big part of that will be also making sure that those intersection improvements are included in the development charge bylaw so that funding can be available for their implementation. So there's several moving parts. And as Greg was mentioning, we're in a bit of a funny place from a transportation planning perspective right now, because we have an approved official plan. And you're right, there's additional lands coming into the urban boundary, even further to the north. So to react to that, the transportation master plan is currently being studied, and the list of ultimate and affordable networks are being developed. So the city is taking a look at the broader brush approach to all transportation issues, particularly for Kanata North, and will work at prioritizing March Road within, taking a look at March, Greenbank Road, other key arterials throughout the network, and then be able to work with the rest of us in our world to help prioritize and get that funding for those key arterials. So my impression is that this will be recognized as being an important corridor for improvement. And so as we work through the next couple of years, we'll see how where those alignments fall in terms of that list for both prioritization and funding. And we'll be able to work within that context to understand how we can get the interim and maybe very short-term and interim solution, especially with signals here to provide access to this site, and make sure that it makes sense with the rest of the corridor.
Yeah, so Greg, you wanted to add something. I just wanted to say regarding the issue of the traffic light, if nobody can answer, I can get back to you with a response from a city transportation engineer on what the requirements would be for them to consider the need of a traffic light at that intersection. Unfortunately, I didn't get anybody, a transportation engineer from the city to join the call, but I can follow up with you on that, Marcel. Yeah, so Greg?
Yeah, just another clarification about DCs that Chris correctly raised. So the way that the system works in the province of Ontario is that developers, as they build these buildings, every door that they build at building permit stage, they contribute to the city's coffers a development charge fund. And so that money goes into the pot, and then the city can allocate it towards these projects to be constructed. And the city actually also offers another opportunity that developers can front end some of these developments for the City of Ottawa. So they can enter through a process called a front ending agreement, where developers, large development parcels like you're seeing to the north, and this was contemplated as part of the expansion of the community design area for Kanata North, is that when those lands start to come on stream, if the money is in like being collected, and the city has allocated that it's in an affordable project that could be done so that there's a reasonable payback to the developers will front end the construction of March Road to the interim measures. But if the project hasn't been listed in the transportation master plan as being affordable, then therefore there's no monies being collected for it. There's no payback period. The developers can't proceed with the developments on it. It's just the way the process works in the province of Ontario, that a lot of these major infrastructure projects are actually funded by the doors that are actually being constructed on them. So that's, most people don't know that, and I think it's an important fact to consider.
Great, thank you. So I'll go to John, and then I will go to Pat McKinnon afterward, because I know you're trying to ask a question. So yes, John.
Hi there. With the March Rural Community Association, I have a bunch of questions, so I'll just start blurting them out. The counts that we're talking about, is this taking into account the full build out of the Kanata North Community Design Plan, plus the newly announced expansion of the Kanata North area all the way to Second Line Road, Old Second Line Road? The other concern that I would have is this 9-story building that's going up. What is the effect, and does this create a precedent for the Kanata North Community Design Plan lands, where this would give a precedent for them to be building 9-story buildings on those lands, which were not contemplated by the community design plan. Concern about the water flow on build out of all of the areas on Shirley's Brook and the effect on this particular development where it's got Shirley's Brook on 3 sides with the water flow requirements from all of the developments. Looking at the maps, I guess a question came to my mind, is there an availability to connect to the future commercial site to the north so that access to the property could go through that commercial site? That would involve some sort of agreement, obviously, with the current there, but they have a pre-approved signal there, because certainly the U-turns and living out here, the ability with a stop sign to try and make a turn is going to be very difficult. I can tell you, even at the signalized intersection at Halton Terrace, trying to make a left-hand turn, it's a little bit blind and you have to inch out to see if there's any other traffic coming. So I agree with the previous speaker that was saying that's a gigantic problem. The density allowances, if you can go into a little bit more discussion about what is actually allowed. Concerned about the shadows being cast from the building for the existing and proposed. And I don't know if there's a shadow diagram that's in the study to be able to say during different times of the year where the shadows are going to be going. Also concerned about what the expected population of the development is going to be and the effect of on the parkland use and school capacities. Obviously, there's going to have to be some sort of cash in lieu because there's no room to add to school capacities. And again, I'm looking at build out of the Kanata North. Also,
30 seconds.
Okay. Does the access road tie in with the existing CDP in the southwest quadrant? And the stopping zone off of March Road for the passenger drop-off for the lobby, I don't know if that is contemplated. And most importantly for us in the March Road Community Association, my last one, is the depth of the parking lot. I believe you were talking about 3 levels. So the depth of the parking lot, the effect on the water table and nearby wells, and is the developer going to have the same requirements as the developers are required in the Kanata North Community Design Plan to ensure that if there is a problem with the water tables and wells of nearby properties, will they be participating in that? I will call it the insurance program, recognizing that this property was not part of the community design plan.
Perfect. Thanks a lot. Sorry, so there were several questions in there. I'm not sure who to direct it for. Maybe we could start with the density targets to Kayla, Alex. Yeah, so maybe we could start with those.
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to you, Alex, if you'd like.
Sure, maybe I can add to that after as well.
Okay, very good. Yes, a number of questions. I'll try to cover off as many and kind of pass it along to colleagues to answer as well. In terms of the density, so the site is currently zoned. It has dual zoning, it's former rural use, as well as what the city put in place that's called development reserve. So just recognizing intent for future development, although at the time it wasn't clear what that might look like. So the purpose of the zoning amendment is to put into place the appropriate zoning to accommodate the mixed use and a mid-rise form. So that form and the density was guided by the city's official plan. It's their new plan that was approved by council in 2021 and then was with the ministry for some time and approved more recently at the end of last year. So that's really what's informing density targets for this site. So it is meeting their targets and kind of recognizing that March Road is an area intended for intensification such as this. And then just provided that it does have that transition back to the adjacent, more established or future low-rise residential. So I guess in summary, the density is kind of in keeping with what was the city's and council's intention. I can comment on the shadowing. There is a shadow study prepared. I believe Alex shared the link to Dev Apps where you can certainly find that study. In general, the study examines months of December, June, and September. So shadow impacts, particularly on the adjacent residential to the east, they appear quite minimal. There's occasional shadowing more towards the later afternoon hours as shadows tend to increase, but given there's considerable distance of 80 meters or so, a lot of the shadowing is actually contained more to the subject site itself, as well as just the adjacent tributary areas. I believe there was a question just related to impacts of water flow. I could just touch on that briefly in that there is a biologist engaged that's completed quite a bit of field work and studies of the tributaries. We're also working with a full team managing stormwater appropriately, such that the intent is to have no net impact on those water courses. And I think I'll pass it perhaps over to Greg, who can comment more on the lands to the north and the precedents, and just given he has quite considerable experience in that area.
Thanks, Kayla, and happy to see you again, John. It's been a little while since we've last chatted through our Kanata North exercises. So you were asking about, and I'll have to defer to Chris about the current counts and stuff on the traffic studies. I think that was one of your questions, but it wouldn't have considered the new area that was just recently added through the ministerial changes to the official plan. So this is where we're talking about going up to St. Isidore's as the current limit of the current CDB processes, as you well know. The ministry has come back with a change to the schedules in the official plan and has extended a potential urban community further north all the way up to March Road and the intersection of Dunrobin Road, going over so far, obviously, as to the railway tracks to the east and then over to Second Line Road, as you correctly noted. So that hasn't even started a planning process yet with the City of Ottawa. The City of Ottawa's new official plan sets out a very detailed process that builds even further on the process that we went through, John, through the old official plan, where we have to go through a community design plan for those new areas, as well as that will result now in a secondary plan amendment. So it's even further enforced than the secondary plan. And that'll still have to go through the full integrated environmental assessment review process, as well as the planning application process for an official plan amendment. To bring those lands into the urban area, we'll have to do an environmental management plan. We'll have to do a transportation master plan again. There will have to be a new land use plan developed. There'll be lots of consultation with the community and public on that whole process as we go through it. So that's yet to come, and it hasn't been considered in this. You were talking about this development about creating some sort of a precedent, and Kayla touched on it, that there is already permissions in the official plan for this particular property that allow it to go up to 9 stories in height. And so that same permissions already extend in the official plan throughout the Kanata North up along the March Road corridor. So we're not creating a new precedent. We're just really fulfilling the policies that are already approved by council for the lands. So it's not opening the door to something else. We're just walking through the door that's already been opened for us on that one. Kayla touched on water concerns that you might have. And I know from our history of discussions, you were asking about well water a lot of the times, but you were also talking about Shirley's Brook. So she mentioned about Shirley's Brook, and it's actually the same team that did the Kanata North CDP exercise for the environmental management plan and for the master servicing study that's also doing the stormwater management for this particular site. So they're well aware of the storm management requirements that are on the site. This site is wholly independent. It's not going to be going to any of the ponds that are going to be constructed because it is in its isolation on its own inside the creek corridors. So there'll be, storage on site, and it'll be released in appropriate manners to achieve the total suspended amounts of release that goes off to the creek corridors. And again, Kayla said that there's an environmental impact study that's been produced. There's been extensive study of the creek corridors that's built on all that history of the environmental management plan that we did through the CDP process. So just as you said, Tributary 2, which is just to the east of us, goes all the way through Kanata North. It will be protected with an ultimate 40-meter corridor. We're obviously providing our portion of that. And that wraps around into Tributary 3, which runs to the north end of our site. The bottom tributary that runs on the south side of our site between us and McDonald's, that has it's a different setback applied to that one because it's not a full tributary. It's actually a release from the stormwater management pond and from the current urbanized section of March Road. So it's treated a little differently on the setbacks to it. With respect to the well water, so this site is inside the urban area, so it wasn't considered as being an issue to be studied on it. It's certainly going to benefit from all of the studies. As you know, there's a very extensive well monitoring program that's been going on for a number of years by the entire Kanata North landowner group, and those results are going to be monitored. And as construction does proceed, we typically do see a condition in there that if the wells are intercepted or something along there, it's a stop. We'll investigate it and figure it out. So we anticipate we'll have discussions with staff going forward on that. But again, we're not anticipating any problems from it. It hasn't been any identified stuff in the geotechnical reports or such that would identify a problem. You mentioned about a connection to the north. Unfortunately, as I said, there's Tributary 3 that runs between ourselves and what was the former Metcalf lands to the north. And so those lands are slated for commercial development, and there's no potential for us to build a bridge or a connection over that section of the tributary because, again, it would be impacting turtle habitat. It would create more disruption to the species. And so we're not anticipating, plus there isn't a need for it. We have an access directly onto March Road. You were talking about school capacity. So as you'll recall, there's 4 schools that were planned as part of the community design plan process. Those sites have now been reserved through the various processes that are going forward. I'm working on at least 2 of those applications. One of them will be a high school, and each one of the different school boards has reserved one of those school sites going forward. So it'll be anticipated that, through a combination of schools and your typical portables or whatever it is, school accommodation for this particular site will be dealt with through that as well. School capacity is not dealt with through a cash in lieu situation. It's just the school boards just basically comment on these applications and decide for themselves whether or not there's enough capacity in their system. And they haven't indicated any problems with this application so far. The cash in lieu typically does apply through these applications when it deals with parkland contribution. Given this small site, it's not possible to really provide a whole park on it. But there is a community park that's provided that's just going to be happening just as part of the Brazil development to the west. Plus there's parkland that's developed as part of the CU the Copperwood that's developing to the northwest, and as well as the Kavanaugh development and the Minto development. So there's parks throughout. The trail system that runs through this site, there will be a dedication because part of the land that this site owns actually falls on the east side of the tributary. So that will be given to the municipality, and that will create a linkage, a missing step in that linkage that already exists on that east side of the creek. There's a trail there today, but it's actually trespassing on this land. So we'll reinforce that and provide that connection. And that will provide the connection from this site and the other community and all the way down into the shopping plaza where the Sobeys is. That will allow you to connect into a trail system, which will connect into the parks and the future commercial development that's going to be located to the north. And then I think that's all that I could answer. So hopefully that answered a lot of your questions, John.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you. So just a quick reminder, there's just about 20 minutes left in our meeting. I will go to Pat McKinnon and then Marcel, likely, I'm guessing based on our previous question and answers. the last two. So Pat, you should receive a prompt that asks you to unmute.
So you hear my dog in the back, ignore it. Just a couple of points that I have to echo. I have to echo the gentleman that spoke about the access to March Road. And you have to remember that, there's a school bus there. The school's there, so your bus is going up twice a day, once in the morning and coming home in the evening. And I'm a great advocate for roundabouts. I don't know if that was ever considered. In that way, the flow of traffic from coming out of the Lapine building, any building on the right-hand side, would have been easy access, but I don't know if that was ever considered. My question is, going back to the Lapine building, you talked about the commercial side. How many parking places and how is the entrance to that particular area? Who can answer that one?
So you can ask all your questions. We will jot them down,
Okay.
and then we'll get.
So I'd like to know how many parking places you have for the commercial section. 560 parking places was mentioned for the Lapine building. Is that for the residents, or how many do you have for visitors? The Lapine building in Kanata, the several Lapine buildings in Kanata, parking is a real problem there. You park on the street if you're a visitor. There's never any space, because I go down that way regularly and visit, and you can't get parked down there. So I don't want to see something like that happen on March Road, or people having to walk from Sobeys to go to the apartment if they're visiting. So I'd like to know how many parking spots they have for visitors there. But that's it for me.
Okay. Okay, thanks a lot. The number of parking spots, Kayla, the visitor versus resident dedicated parking spot.
Yes, I can certainly speak to that. And thank you, Pat, for the comment. There is quite an amount of parking proposed. And it is intended, the 500 and some is intended for residents, for visitors, and for the commercial tenants and any users or visitors of those commercial areas. So to answer your question, there'll be approximately 100 of those spaces that will be designated for visitor and commercial use. A number of them are at grade. The approach was to have some at grade. It's just to the rear of the front block. So to kind of keep the buildings towards the street, but have that parking accessible for in behind for convenient access. And the commercial units are focused towards that north end of the front block, so that is all easily accessible from the parking spaces in that area. And then additionally, like a visitor, if those spaces are being used up, there is the underground parking available for visitors as well.
Great. Thanks a lot, Kayla. So Marcel, you're back up.
Okay, so I'll have a number of questions. I'll go through them fast to touch on each one of them in the 3 minutes so that they can be discussed. Because you're doing two levels of underground parking, I'm wondering if blasting will be required and what kind of protection will be provided for neighbors. When you give the description of the property, you talk about 9 stories at the front on March Road and how it steps down to 3 stories when you're getting closer to the residences at the back, which I can appreciate. And then you're stepping down to 7 stories. In reality, if you're on Windance, when you're facing the building, you're actually facing 4 floors of apartments as opposed to 3, and you're facing 8 floors of apartments as opposed to 7. And I am at the end of Windance, where I am closest to the property. So I will be facing a wall of 8 floors of apartments. Even though that's considered to be a nice step down to 7. It is 8, and there was some discussion about shadowing. definitely affects my property, and I would appreciate if we could get a more in-depth report on how much shadowing I will be getting. I got a couple of days where I know what the shadowing is, but it'd be nice to sort of get it spread out more over time. So being so close, stepping down to 3, I'd be really happy. Stepping down to 7, actually 8, not so happy. It does talk about landscaping. At the tributary, there's hardly no landscaping whatsoever currently. The reports do talk about the lack of tree cover for the riparian habitat, and that some significant plantings need to be made. And so I would want to ensure that there is a landscaping plan provided for the property that provides for significant landscaping along that back. So originally I was facing a 1-story, likely home hardware type of building, but now it's going to be actually 8 floors. So the question there, blasting, step down, landscaping. One slide that was shown tonight even showed chain link fence and a path, and then the creek. I'm not sure if that's the chain link on my side of the creek where we are and our path, or if there is another path being planned for the Lapine Apartments property. There seems to be some discussion that yes, there's a path, and then there's other places where there's no discussion of a path. I'm not sure if there is a path or not. And it did talk about a path with access to Maxwell Bridge.
30
I'm not
seconds.
sure how you can do that without doing a bridge. So that's the issue there. And chain link, tributary, step down. I'll leave it at that.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you. Okay, so yes, blasting. Maybe we could start with that one. Will the site require blasting? We know quite a bit about blasting in the Ward 4 office. Yeah, so will the site require blasting?
I was, perhaps I will pass this to Kim if.
Yeah, I'm just, I wanted to verify if Pascal and Francis wanted to react to this one, as they are well known concerning
Okay,
the.
yeah, so Greg
blasting.
seems to have an answer. Yeah, go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, you probably know, Andrew and Councillor, about the blasting requirements. So there's a standard condition for the City of Ottawa that's imposed on development applications that speaks to blasting and when it can happen in the hours of operation. There's also a typical process that is required by the developers to go through where they do a pre-blast inspection. So they hire a company like Explotech or somebody that goes around and does an investigation of all the neighboring properties, identify cracks and stuff and foundations and problems. And then there's a post exploration on this is done quite often as well. Blasting is, as the councillor's assistant said, it happens throughout Kanata. It's well known. There hasn't been documented problems, of significant problems in any kind of way with any blasting activity that's ever happened in Kanata. It's just part of the normal process of business. And as I said, there will be a condition on the development that they have to follow that standard process. And again, before any blasting activity, as a courtesy, we always reach out to the councillor's office to notify them as to when that blasting is going to happen so that the residents aren't caught off guard. And that typically happens around the time when we get a commence work for the construction on the site.
And maybe I'll just speak to the landscaping. So that would be done as part of site plan control. And so those plans, we have received them, however, they've not been circulated yet. And I think my preference, perhaps in discussion with the applicant, would be to circulate them with the second zoning bylaw submission. So that way we're not circulating 3 things and it starts to get kind of confusing. As well, I believe the sketch of the stream is just a potential cross section from the Kanata North Community Design Plan, not a specific design.
Great. And then on the step downs, so the 9 to 3, so the residents on Windance, the impact of the step down on the residents there.
Yeah, I can speak to that one. And to just back on the matter of shadowing, Andrew, I'll just ensure that you have the link that can be shared for the detailed shadow study that has the study of all the time periods throughout the day, at the requirements. So I'll ensure that can be shared. Yes, in terms of the rear facade, so it is the topography of the site drops quite substantially towards the rear, so that what is the P1 level, what is kind of basement level at March Road, becomes exposed towards the rear of the site as the grade drops. So that's the reason for the building, the rear facade does appear taller. And that was, so it also allows for kind of more advantage in that area, that there can be terraces and use of that or enjoyment for the residents. But the approach was to have subtle transition using terraces back up to a 7-story, or which will read like an 8-story. So I think we hear your comment, and we'll certainly consider and look at possible ways to mitigate that massing. But,
That's why, Kyla, we stepped the terrace as well from on the houses as well. So the last floor is recessed from the front facade as well.
Great, thanks a lot, Kim. So John, you might wrap us up given our time limit. Marcel, if you want me to ask a question, maybe you could send it to me in the chat. But to you, John, you have to unmute.
Sorry about that. I'll try to be quick. The last time I asked about the stopping zone, is looking at the picture or the drawing of the front, the access to the lobby is on March Road. So presumably the expectations, people are going to be dropping off there. Is there contemplation for a lay-by zone, or is March Road going to be allow parking on the road? And again, I guess going back to the issue with the visitor space, I don't even know where the closest parking would be for this particular development. And my follow-up question was with regards to the commercial space, how much commercial space is there contemplated? I know it's over 3 units. And what is the type of target retail that you're looking to use in that space? Thanks.
Great. Thanks a lot for the question.
I can answer something.
Yeah, please go ahead. Please go ahead. Yeah.
So there's no drop off on March Road side. So you have to enter to the courtyard, and you have roundabout, so that then you have 27 parking spots on ground at grade for visitors and commercial spaces. So you don't stop on March Road at all. You have to enter to the courtyard. And some other visitors parking are down below grade, of course. We have approximately, as Kyla said, 100 parking for visitors below grade.
One thing I'll mention is that there is some foreshadowing to from the perspective that there will be transit happening along March Road, even if in the shorter term it's just a local transit route. So the idea that someone could enter the lobby from March Road having just exited a bus, if you will, is part of the rationale for having the frontage onto the road. But there will be no car parking or stopping along March Road in the short term or long term.
Perfect. Yes, Marcel, you for a brief comment to you. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, just as far as a perspective and context, I am probably the closest resident to the Lippian property. The other ones are a bit further down the road and further away. So the ones that are further away will be looking at a 3-story, 4-floor apartment, whereas as closest to it, I'm looking at the 8 floors, and I am also a 1-story bungalow with a loft. So 2/3 of my property is actually a 1-story home facing the 8 floors. So just a little bit of context.
Great. Thank you. I don't know if anybody wants to comment. There is one question left in the chat, and this is actually to Greg. I hope it's very short here. Could you clarify your comment about the door already being open and us just walking through it regarding the 9-story the intensification?
Yeah, so what I was referring to is that the City of Ottawa, and Kayla had flashed it on the screen there, that there's a policy schedule for the suburban transect in the new official plan that identifies March Road as a corridor. And so the City of Ottawa's policies for that corridor allow for developments up to 9 stories in height. So the question that Mr. Horowitz had asked was whether or not this development was creating some sort of a precedent. It isn't a precedent because City Council approved a designation along that corridor that allows for greater density. So what we're doing is now filing a zoning amendment application that conforms to the official plan. And that's a critical exercise. And in fact, the City of Ottawa is undertaking a new zoning bylaw process where they're going to be looking at all the zones. So whether we did it or eventually the city did it, sooner or later, the zones would have to conform to the official plan. So they would be brought in, and probably 9 stories would be permitted as of right in the fullness of time anyways. So it's just because we have an application today, we can't wait for that process to be completed for the zoning bylaw to be updated by the City of Ottawa. That won't happen until probably 2025 at the earliest at this stage. And so our development is proceeding now. And so we filed an application through the Planning Act process to amend the zoning to bring it into conformity with the official plan. So hopefully that answers your question.
Great. Just there was a question in the chat about the possibility of sharing tonight's presentation. I will maybe email you, Kayla, afterwards about the possibility. And if so, the resident who requested it, you can reach out to our office and we can see if we can share that with you. Yeah, John, is it a quick comment? Yeah, or you're good? Okay, you're good. Okay.
I think he needs to be unmuted.
I'm prompting him. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, just quickly, Kathy, who is the counselors? Is it the two of you that are still responsible for this, or is this gone into your ward now?
It's just me, John, because Clark, once the official plan was passed and our ward boundaries were all redone, it was very clear that this is mine now as of the election.
And just so I know, the Marchbrook Circle, are we part of you now, or are we still rural?
No, Marchbrook Circle. So strangely, Old Carp Road got split in half. If you look at exactly how it was newly drawn, so the half of Old Carp Road, so all of that is all Ward 4, me.
Yeah.
And then the other half, which is your Marchbrook Circle, is Clark Kelly.
Governments, I love them.
It's strange, eh? The way they did that boundary is quite strange. You'll have to look at how it sort of curves back and around and over.
Okay.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, but it was just to capture most of the new development, right? And put it into Kanata North instead of West Carleton.
Yeah.
Which it used to be Kanata North as well, you know? It keeps moving, the line keeps moving back and forth.
No, I won't even go into Old Carp Road problems.
Yeah. I know, half of them are mine now.
That's right.
So, all right. So I think we are at 8:30. I really appreciate everyone's questions and comments, and there still is time. So Andrew's put in the chat, Alex is the planner here. Alex's email is alex, alex.gatien, or Gatien, Gatien @ottawa.ca. So further comments can go to Alex. You can copy me, Andrew. If you copy me, Andrew gets it anyway, Kathy.curry@ottawa.ca. But make sure you send them all to Alex so he can keep track of them and look at exactly, once you've had time now to see it, you think some more, you've got some more comments, some more thoughts, some more questions, make sure you send them. And as I said, lots more to come. You know, there was the mention that, you know, the zoning bylaw review is all another big consultation, so that, you know, in the end, hopefully the zoning will be such that we won't have to have as many of these meetings, but nonetheless, I mean, I enjoy these meetings and I enjoy listening to the questions and the presentations. And I really thank you all, the planners and the developers, for coming out tonight to provide this opportunity for people to actually see what might come and what their concerns might be. So thank you all very much. I look forward to future ones. As I said, there's many more to come. Thanks and have a great evening, everyone.
Take care. Take care. Sorry, yeah, John, I see your message here. Deadline for comments. I'm not actually entirely sure. If you want to just send us here, John, if you want me to just send me an email or send an email to kathy.curry@ottawa.ca, I'll be able to get you the information on when the deadline for comments is, but it goes through multiple iterations. So this is like the first comment submission, a second comment submission, etc. Yeah, you do feel free to email the office and we'll happily give you the deadline specifically, but yeah.
Okay, thanks.
No problem. Have a great one. Thanks for attending.
Bye-bye.
Bye. John, any outstanding things on your end, or you're good to go as well?